How do you approach the awkward conversations with your spouse about wanting to build a business from the ground up? When we start a business, we so often don't think of many key pieces. And one of those things is the discussions that we're going to have with our spouse around what it's going to look like for our household moving forward and growing that business, how we're going to approach the topic of money and how we're going to fund that business, all sorts of other things. So today, I have a sweet, brilliant guest to get into it with me. Dr. Elizabeth Polinsky is a marriage and sex therapist, a military spouse, and the director of Communicate and Connect Counseling, which is headquartered in Virginia Beach, Virginia. So without further ado, let's get into it. So will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, happy to share. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I work with couples mostly and really specialize in working with military couples who are struggling to really stay connected, both emotionally and physically when there are, the unique stressors of military life. And so I run a group practice, which is a training clinic for upcoming therapists to learn how to do couples counseling. That's headquartered in Virginia, called Communicate and Connect Counseling. A lot of them are military spouses. We focus on really military relationships, and so that is a little bit about me. And I know in the context of this podcast specifically, I am a military spouse also. Both my husband and I come from dual military families. And so trying to grow a group therapy training clinic has been really interesting as a military spouse.
I
Yeah.
bet it has. So, wow. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, first of all. I'm really excited to have this discussion with you because I think one of the topics that's just such an incredibly difficult thing, and maybe arguably one of the most important things for us to have in a marriage is communication.
Yes.
And not just communication, but like effective, respectful communication. That's, we're not always taught how to do that. I know in my
Yeah.
household growing up, my parents sometimes loved each other and sometimes didn't like each other. So when they didn't like each other, we knew it. I'm not gonna, dog my parents out here, but we don't always learn what respectful communication looks like. Along those lines, you and I are going to discuss how we have these conversations with our spouse. We could just easily throw, a topic at them and like now it's out in the open, but you're going to help us reach that conversation in a way that we can really open the dialogue so everybody can have their say and feel seen and heard, but all of the important pieces get out there. So,
Yes. Yeah. So I'm thinking maybe I could start with just what makes communication hard sometimes.
yeah, that would be great.
Um, yeah, okay. And so, different people might talk a little bit differently about this, but the way that I like to think about it is that we all get emotionally triggered by things. And that when I'm emotionally triggered, my whole nervous system gets sort of flooded. I'm feeling vulnerable. I'm feeling anxious,
Mhm.
or disrespected in like a really rough sort of conflict moment. And it's very hard. Like if the emotional center of my brain, which is the amygdala, is on and it's going, the part of me that can be logical and problem solving, which is our prefrontal cortex, that slows down so much. And so oftentimes challenges with communication are about I'm triggered right now. And when I'm triggered, it's very hard to tell you about what's going on. And then of course, if I'm triggered, you might get triggered in response, and then couples can get stuck in this loop where they don't mean to, but they're just triggering each other back and forth. And so this is, I think, one of the key pieces that makes communication really hard um, on both sides for couples is dealing with the ways that whatever we're talking about is bringing up my own fear.
Yeah.
So that would be thing number one, maybe.
Back up. I know that when I had that conversation with my husband,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I was emotionally triggered, like from the perspective of angry or
Right.
frustrated, but perhaps anxious. And even so,
Anxious.
I know that that will bring you to a different state of mind and somatically even. So uh, I think it would be, it's so great to understand that if we're going to have what feels like a bigger conversation or a heavy conversation, or there are a little bit of nerves about approaching the topic, that maybe there are some tools that we can use before even saying, hey, babe, let's have the conversation, right? So, do you
Yeah.
have maybe a quick tool somebody could use just to kind of get to the space where they're ready to have that conversation from a clear mind?
Yes, I'm thinking there are several things that are coming to my mind. So I think you're right that like going in to talk to your partner about starting a business, you're probably not in a conflict mode, but you might be feeling very anxious. And so thinking in advance, like what it is that I want to say to my partner, what it is that I want to convey to them, and what I want to ask them for, having that sort of planned out in advance can be really helpful. And then you're going to want to do things to help calm your anxiety. So there are several different um, like relaxation skills you can do. Paced breathing is a really easy one, which is where you just, when you're controlling your breathing, you breathe in for maybe 5 seconds and then breathe out for eight. And the important part with paced breathing is that the exhale is longer than the inhale because that actually helps slow down your heart rate. Your heart rate beats slower when you exhale than it does when you inhale. So, this is a way that you can literally help calm your body going into the conversation. And and I've also known people who, if the anxiety was so high, they might write letters, like couples who would write letters to each other around a conversation that might be difficult. Of course, you could do email, you could make that an email as well. Um, but sometimes that can be really helpful if the conversation is very anxiety provoking.
Oh my goodness, that is brilliant. First of all, let me just say thank you for sharing that. It's so funny. As an extrovert, I just dive into conversations. Gratefully, these days I do it much more responsibly and respectfully than I used to. But I'm not afraid. Let's go. Let's have the conversation. But I take for granted that that's how I am, and that's comfortable to just go into a conversation in a lot of ways. Conflict a little different, but we're not necessarily talking about that just yet.
Right.
My husband, on the other hand, is an extreme introvert. And it
Yeah.
reminds me when we started dating, he liked to do the chat because we've been together for almost 20 years now. And so the chatting was a big thing. Like just on the computer, I forget. I
Yeah.
don't even know what the
IMing or
chats.
instant messaging or
IM,
whatever.
yes. And so I used to want to have a phone call, and he's like, let's just chat. And I'm like, it makes so much sense now. For some people, just having that conversation is overwhelming. But if you can put it on paper or, in an email, that might make it so much better either for you or for, your significant other. Oh,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, the other thing that's coming to my mind right now as you're talking about that is checking with your partner if it's a good time to talk
Mm,
or scheduling a time to talk. Just letting them know, like, I have something I've been thinking about that I really want your opinion on. Can we set aside a time to talk about it? So that way they're not, especially if you can dive in, but your partner is introverted or is can get really hyper focused on whatever they're doing and they don't want to be interrupted. That can help them kind of signal that you really need their attention and for their mental presence for the conversation as well.
yeah, I get that. Allow them to prepare in a way that makes
Hmm.
sense for them so that they can be present with you, which of course is what we all want. We definitely don't want to have that serious of a conversation, and have our partner not be fully present with us. So,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. And a lot of the couples that I work with, I like to tell them to have a monthly marriage meeting where they're going over a variety of things in their relationship already. And so my husband and I, we've been doing it since we were dating. And we have we have years of Google Drive files of all of our different meetings. But we still do it every single month. And one of the things that we cover is work related projects. And so that he'll let me know like, oh, we're leaving with the military to do whatever this month. And that's also a time that I could say, like, I'm thinking about this with my business. And it's something that I want to consider or that I'm just pondering, and that he can then have a chance, like, he knows we're going to talk about work stuff then.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Having the opportunity to get everybody set up in that right state of mind and all of those tools, just because knowing that you have to do it and knowing how to do it are two different things. So thank you so much for taking the time to share those tools with us so that we can be prepared to have these
Yeah.
conversations. So let's say that we do have somebody who's like, I want to start a business, freaked out about what that means discussing this with my spouse because let's just assume that it's similar to what my experience was. I wasn't working
Mm,
outside of the house. So when I say I wasn't working, I didn't have a paycheck. I was working as a stay-at-home mom. So nobody was paying me for that. But that's besides the point. I think that's a lot of military spouses have a similar experience where we're stay-at-home moms. We really want something that belongs to us, want that other income for the family. So instead of going out and finding a traditional job, because we all know that there are a zillion hurdles when it comes to that for our community,
yeah.
we turn to entrepreneurship. And if you don't know how you're going to fund that, if you don't
Mm,
have, an outside source to have, if you haven't received a grant or some kind of other funding, the conversation with the spouse is, hey, we need to figure out how to do this. So can you help us kind of dive into what that might look like having that conversation so it's constructive
yeah.
for everybody involved?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I'm glad we're talking about this because money is a hot topic for couples, and it's very easy that could become tense.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking about the importance of being transparent throughout the entire process. Like, maybe you don't have all the answers yet. Like, I'm just imagining, if this were me and my husband, he would probably have questions, and I might not have those answers for him yet. And that, I think, would be okay. I could still let him know, this is something I'm considering. This is something I want to do. I'm still gathering all the information. And you can be inclusive of your partner as you are finding answers to those questions that they might have.
Yeah.
Of course, it might depend on the type of business that someone is going into. Some are, um, relatively inexpensive, like the filing fees or whatever, and then some could be a rather large expense. And so that would be something to be talking about together, and maybe even talking about, like, how could we find the money for it? That this is something that really really matters to me, is something that I want for us and our family, kind of leading a bit with the values and the personal importance of it, can also help.
I am so glad you said the personal importance because that is literally the very next thing I was going to ask you about. Because it is a heavy, you hit the nail on the head. I think just statistically, I don't know the statistics off the top of my head, maybe you do, but statistically, money issues are up
Yeah,
here. For those who are listening now, watching, my hand is above my head. Money issues are big in a marriage and any kind of romantic relationship. And so, that said, there's also the aspect of it's bigger than money. Yes, I want to have an income for our house, a second income for our household.
yeah,
And yes, this is going to cost us money up front. And I know that that's a consideration that we have to really dive into as a couple, and also being able to relay the importance of it for you. And I know that this is part. I started to say this earlier and I got myself on a tangent, which I tend to do. But this was something that was huge for me when I was looking at, okay, I want to start a business. And the business I was wanting to start at the time was handmade goods. So it was products, not services. A little bit more money when you have to start in,
yeah,
right? And so I realized that, but also I needed something desperately. And at the same time, I was feeling so much guilt around admitting that out loud to another human being. It was hard enough for me to admit to myself that I'm a stay-at-home mom. I love my children. They fulfill me in all of the ways that children fulfill a parent. And they can't fulfill something inside of me outside of that that I still need as a whole
Yeah.
human being, right? And there was like a lot of guilt around that. So
Yeah.
some of these
It's so
conversations,
normal.
yeah, what would
Mom
you,
guilt, right?
yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What advice would you have for, attending to that?
Yeah. I'm thinking there are a few things coming to my mind right now. So let me just organize them a minute.
Mhm.
Um, One, I want to just normalize that every mom I've ever met has mom guilt. Whether it's I need like 20 minutes to myself, or I need us to get a babysitter to watch them for the day, or I need to go get a haircut, whatever it is, I've never met a mom who didn't have mom guilt. So one, I want to just normalize that
Thank you.
that process.
Yes, thank you so much
Um,
for that.
yeah, and say, of course you need something other than your kids. Of course, you need that. And to have something that's yours, that is part of your identity, that can be something that's separate from kids and family life and marriage and military life, something that is just for you. We all need that.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to thank you again for because, and I say this, I say some of these things as well from my own perspective. And as a life coach, I'm like, you get to have things that belong to you and you get to shed
Yeah.
that guilt. But to hear you say it, it's almost like you're speaking to me because I say it to other people, but it's nice to have it said where I get to receive
Huh.
it too. So I really wanted to thank you for putting that out, not just for me, for the community, because it really is all of us together who are experiencing this. And we don't always talk about it. People say mom guilt, but what does that mean? We're familiar with the term mom guilt, but how many times do we really talk about what that's really feeling like to us as individuals? Why are you feeling
Yeah.
guilty? Like, what is that doing to you? And we don't always talk about
Yeah.
that in depth. So to have you normalize it for us and say, hey, you're human, and of course you want more. That's not selfish, friends. It's so
Yes.
good to hear that.
Yeah, and I would think like you need to be aware of your needs and meeting your needs
Mhm.
to just to be feeling good as an individual living in life, let
Yeah.
alone to be able to sh like share that with your partner or with your kids. And there's a lot of modeling that goes into that. Like sometimes I have a huge feminist side of me. So I'm sorry if this is getting into a rant, but I'm thinking
Not at
about
all.
the social pressure that's put on women to be like, now it's your role to be the mom. And that's what you're supposed to live for. And that's the only thing that should make you happy. And there's just so much pressure there. And then I um, I think about what would I want my daughter to learn? Like what sort of gender socialization would I want the next gender generation to have? And the way that we can help, yeah, like new generations of women not struggle so much with something like mom guilt is by challenging it ourselves, by saying I'm gonna model and show to boys and girls that it's okay for moms to want things. It's okay for them to have needs. It's okay for them to have something outside of only focusing on you. So I feel like it's really important work actually to be doing that for yourself, not just for you, but it helps with the social shift over time.
Yeah, that's such a powerful perspective. We are so like we very much do need to be in tune with both things, right? Both all aspects. I know what I need to provide for myself and I have to get okay. And when I say I mean I'm speaking on behalf of all women everywhere. You have to be able to say I am okay with claiming what I want for me. It's not selfish. And because so many of us, no matter how many times we say self-care is not selfish, taking care of you is not selfish, it is necessary, there's still a piece. There's still a little piece who's like, but your kids. But if you look at it from the perspective, like you said, you're showing them how they get to be. how to
Yeah.
approach these topics as they become bigger people in the big bad world and how they get to exist without that guilt. We get to show
Yeah.
them how to do that. Yeah.
And even for like if you have boys,
Hmm.
like you're modeling what like acceptance of women of like it's gonna be okay. You shouldn't. If a couple obviously decides they want a very traditional family structure, that's a totally different thing. That's cool.
Sure.
But I would also want like my son to be like totally fine if he was dating somebody who wanted to work and be a sta and have kids or wanted to build their own business. You know, it's also teaching young boys how to think about women.
Yeah. Yeah, I
So,
love that. And you're absolutely right. Nobody's here to tell anybody what they have to do, right? If you want kids, if you don't want kids, if you want a traditional, kind of situation in your family life, or if you want something a little bit more, little less traditional, we're absolutely not here to tell anybody what they have to do. But
yeah.
to give a way forward, if this is something you're saying, you're listening to, and you're saying, no, I resonate with that. That is what I recognize I want more than to be a stay-at-home mom and giving you permission to say that you you can claim that for yourself. But this is if you're saying, okay, they're speaking to me, yes, we are speaking to you. And if you're like, that's not what I want, it's okay. You don't have to. You
Yeah.
don't have to want that for yourself. I
Yeah.
suspect though, if somebody's listening to this conversation, it's because it is what they want.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
And
they
they want a
randomly
business.
stumbled upon us.
Yeah. People listening to this are probably like, I want to start a business.
If
And
Yeah, if they're
awesome.
not, hopefully they are by the time they're done with this. I can help you. Liz can help you.
Yeah.
We can all help you. Okay. So, but yeah, okay. I got a little off track there. Like I said, I tend to do that. I like tangents. That's not why
Yeah.
everybody's here. So let's get back on track. So we talked about having to have the conversation with ourselves first and foremost, really.
Yeah.
What that looks like from an emotional standpoint, getting into a space where we're more kind of emotionally stabilized, I guess is an
Hmm.
appropriate way to say it. And then actually broaching that conversation, having the conversation with our significant other on the topic of what we need from a like,
Yes.
this is what I need for me to be fulfilled. This is how I need you to support me. Actually, I don't think we really specifically talked about that, but maybe we can get there here in just a little bit. But then also having, the conversation with them about money, being clear,
Hmm.
this is what it's going to look like going forward. So can we talk about how you actually let your significant other know what their contribution is, what you hope their contribution is going to be? Having that kind of
Yes.
conversation with them?
Yeah, absolutely. There are different strategies that are out there, but I think one that's really easy to use is the acronym DEAR, where you describe the situation, that's the D. E is express your thoughts and feelings about it. A is ask for what you want, and then R is reinforce, and which is basically this is the positive outcome of you giving me what I want. And you could use it for anything.
We're not
Um,
talking about manipulation here.
Right. Yeah. No, it's just talking about the pros,
Yeah.
right? The pros of, if you can help me get this started, I think that I can really be successful and it's going to add more income to our family overall. That's just a pro of me doing this, right? So if I were going to do this, my describe might be, hey, I've been thinking about starting a business and I've wanted to talk to you about it. I'm just describing the situation. Express. I have really been feeling like I need something more in my life and I want to do this creative business idea that I have.
Mhm.
However, I need like $500 to get started. Um, would you be willing to invest $500 for me to get this going? That's my clear ask. You could say, I realize it's a lot of money if you want, but I think it's going to help us long term. It's going to make me feel better. It's going to feel like I have something that's mine. And, I think I'm going to be successful and that could add more money to our finances. And so what I just did was I used DEAR, the exact acronym, and that would be a great way to be really clear with your partner about what it is you're looking for from them.
Yeah. That's so good. If you weren't taking notes, write that, rewind this and write that down. That was so good. Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that. It really makes it feel like having this conversation isn't so overwhelming. Had I had all this information and that acronym when I had the conversation with my husband, I think I would have been more settled and not felt that level of guilt that I felt. And again, I'm very clear about this because my husband is an amazing man and very supportive.
Yeah.
So I don't ever want anybody to think I'm dragging anybody I love through the mud. All of this was internal. Just to say that,
Yeah.
put that out in the open there. But yes, having all of those tools that you just shared makes this conversation feel so much more approachable in a way that feels good, not anxiety inducing. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Yeah, I've enjoyed us getting to chat about this.
Yeah, this has been great. Do you have any final tips? Anything as we kind of get ready to wrap up here, anything that we haven't covered that you feel would be really necessary for somebody to know or that you'd love to share?
Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking about how much courage it takes for people to be vulnerable in this way, to state what they want. And I think I would just encourage people to be vulnerable and to really claim what it is that they're looking for in life. Um, and my hope is that your partner is going to be so supportive of you. And if not, then I'm thinking that that's maybe where counseling could be helpful for people because I feel like it's part of our role in a partnership to support each other's dreams and aspirations in life. And that's what I would hope for everybody.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. And on that note, counseling is something that you can help people with if that is something that they're recognizing would be very beneficial. So, people want to learn more about working with you. How can they contact you?
Yeah, they can go to our website, which is communicateandconnect.com. We have blogs, we have a podcast that's focused on military relationships and lots of resources there. And then we have a team of therapists who are all helping military couples improve their marriages. So,
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. And last thing here, you mentioned a podcast. Will you share just a little bit about your podcast?
yeah, so it's the Communicate and Connect podcast for military relationships,
Mm.
and you can find it on all the major podcast platforms. We have it up on YouTube as well, and it really is very focused on going over communication tools like Dear or other communication tools with a variety of relationship experts, many who have worked with military or veteran populations specifically, to give people very clear tips on how to communicate and more clearly and effectively, and also how to stay emotionally and physically connected to their partner.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. This has been incredible. Like I said, I've been in my relationship with my husband for almost 20 years now, and I still am taking all sorts of wisdom from you and how I can continue to approach our relationship and our conversations and continue down the road of having a happy marriage. So I thank you so very much for that. And on behalf of everybody who's listening, I'm sure that they've taken some incredible tips away today. So I appreciate you. Thank you so much for spending your time with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely.